Mohammad Marandi, professor of the University of Tehran, is joining me now live from Beirut to share his thoughts with us on these comments that have been made both from the Western side and from the Iranian side. Mr. Marandi, welcome to the program. First of all, how helpful and constructive are these comments made by, for instance, the US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, that Washington's approach towards Iran, she says, is a combination of pressure and negotiation, and also EU Foreign Policy Chief Ms. Ashton's statement that Iran should scrap its nuclear program, while Tehran and the P5+1 are getting ready for a new round of talks in Baghdad?
The comments that they've made are definitely not constructive. In fact, they're quite the opposite. And I think that people in Tehran will be wondering whether this means that negotiations in Baghdad are going to fail, or is this just rhetoric being produced by Western officials to put pressure on Iran. What Ashton said about an Iranian weapons program is obviously completely unsubstantiated. The Iranians, their program is open to the IAEA, and the IAEA has never produced any evidence whatsoever that Iran's nuclear program at any time in the past as it being containing a military component. So as far as records show, the Iranian program is peaceful and has always been peaceful. But I think what is important is that these countries and the West in general recognize that the Iranians are not going to give up nuclear enrichment, and they are not going to give up the Fordow plant. The Iranians are quite willing to take steps after the Western powers make the first move in order to bring about a resolution and to create greater goodwill. But these comments do not create goodwill.
Well, in a number of occasions, the P5+1 have, Iran says, reneged on their previous agreements, including, they say, the Turkey and Brazil brokered nuclear fuel swap deal that was made at the behest of the US. So do you think that the P5+1 is ready for meaningful talks with Iran this time round? I mean, we know that the Istanbul talks were hailed as being constructive and a step forward, but does that mean that there's going to be meaningful talks in Baghdad?
It really depends on the West. The West has on many occasions been dishonest in its dealings with Iran. When Iran halted nuclear enrichment for 2 years and implemented the additional protocol, and it was revealed that there was no evidence that Iran's nuclear program was anything but peaceful, Western countries dragged their feet. They basically dragged their feet and wanted to prevent Iran from restarting the nuclear program. Or, as you mentioned, the Tehran Declaration, which was the Americans basically slapped the Brazilian president and the Turkish prime minister in the face because they immediately went for sanctions after the Tehran Declaration was signed, and it was signed within a framework that, according to the Obama letter, was acceptable to the United States. And then, of course, there are other cases, such as the so-called laptop, where the Americans claim that they discovered or obtained from Iran, and they claimed that it had evidence that Iran's nuclear program had a military element to it. The Iranians told the IAEA to show this to computer experts to see if it's a fraud or if it's the real thing, and the Americans refused to do so. So it's clear that the Americans fabricated evidence in order to put Iran in a difficult position. So they have a very dark past, and I think that in the Iranians this time around, they were expecting these countries to make the first move and the Western countries to make a major step forward to gain the trust of the Iranian people. Just one other thing that I should add, in that the 5+1 is not a unified body. The Russians and the Chinese have said repeatedly that they have never had any evidence that Iran's nuclear program is anything but peaceful, and they have been very much against the irrational behavior that we have seen coming from Washington and Europe.
Right. Ms. Marandi, just before we leave you, quickly if you can, if these talks do fail, what is going to happen next? There's been, of course, talks of further sanctions, even threats of military attacks. So what should we be expecting?
Well, I think the sanctions will be hurting the Europeans. Any sanctions will be hurting the Europeans and the Americans more than they will hurt Iran, because they will definitely lose the Iranian market. and the Iranians will be moving on to new partners, and they are already doing so. You see that trade with China, with India, with other countries is increasing dramatically. The world has changed. The goods that Iran needs can be found throughout the world. The United States and Europe, they are on the decline, relatively speaking, to when compared to the rest of the world, and they need trade with Iran. Whereas the Iranians can find new partners to replace them. It will create difficulty, but we see that the Iranian economy continues to grow despite the sanctions. On the other hand, any threat of military action would only increase the price of oil, and an attack itself would have a very robust response from Iran, and it would create an economic catastrophe for the world, because there will no longer be any oil and gas exported from the Persian Gulf or the region at large. And that will not only create a catastrophe for Western economies, but the international community will condemn them for any form of aggression.
Thank you very much, Mohammad Marandi, Professor of the University of Tehran, joining us there live from Beirut.